My name is Cassidy Harper, and I'm 32 years old. Right now, I'm standing in a bridal boutique in downtown Seattle, staring at my phone like it just slapped me across the face. The screen shows a wedding invitation, all elegant script and cream-colored cardstock, announcing my sister Brooke's upcoming nuptials. The date printed in gold foil is September 15th. That's my wedding date, the date I announced 8 months ago. The date I sent Save the Cards for. The date I've been planning every single detail around. This isn't a coincidence. Brooke knew. She's always known. And this calculated move to steal my wedding day, is just the latest betrayal in a lifetime of them. Before we dive into this mess, let me ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? Drop your location in the comments, because I want to know where my story is reaching. And if you've ever dealt with family drama that made you question everything, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see how this whole thing plays out, because trust me, you won't believe where this goes. Now let's get into how my sister tried to destroy the happiest moment of my life and what I finally decided to do about it. Growing up in the Harper household meant understanding one fundamental truth from the moment I could form coherent thoughts. Brooke was the star, and I was the supporting cast member who occasionally got a line or two. My parents, Judith and Marshall Harper, never explicitly said they loved her more. They didn't have to. Every action, every decision, every family moment screamed it loud enough that words would have been redundant. Brooke arrived 3 years after me, and from that moment forward, the entire family orbit shifted to revolve around her. She was the beautiful one, the charming one, the one who could do no wrong even when she was doing everything wrong. Meanwhile, I became the responsible one, the achiever who had to work twice as hard for half the recognition. The evidence of favoritism wasn't subtle. When Brooke turned 16, our parents surprised her with a brand new Honda Civic, complete with a giant red bow on the hood like something out of a commercial. They threw a party to present it to her, inviting half the neighborhood to witness their generosity. When I turned 16 3 years earlier, my father handed me classified ads for used cars and told me that earning my own vehicle would teach me character. I worked 2 jobs that summer, saving every paycheck, and bought a beat-up Toyota with 130,000 miles on it. My parents praised my work ethic at dinner one night, then immediately asked if I'd seen Brooke's report card, which apparently deserved more attention than my financial independence. College was the same story written in bigger, more expensive ink. Brooke's tuition, to a private liberal arts school, was paid in full by our parents. They covered her housing, her meal plan, her textbooks, even her spring break trips. When she changed majors 3 times in 4 years, they supported every pivot without question. I got partial funding and had to take out student loans for the rest. I worked through college, juggling classes, and a job at the campus library, graduating with honors and $20,000 in debt. Brooke graduated with a degree in communications she never used and 0 debt. The message was clear. She was worth the investment. I needed to prove my worth. Even our achievements were measured on different scales. When I got accepted to graduate school for architecture, my parents sent a congratulatory card. When Brooke got certified as a yoga instructor after a 6-week course, they threw her a celebration dinner and invited the entire extended family. I opened my own architecture firm at 28, the youngest person in our city to do so. My parents attended the opening reception, stayed for exactly 45 minutes, and spent most of that time on their phones checking in on Brooke, who was dealing with some minor drama with her roommate. I gave a speech that night about building dreams into reality. My parents didn't hear it. They were already in their car, heading home to make sure Brooke was okay. But the first major betrayal, the one that should have taught me everything I needed to know about Brooke's character, happened when I was 24. I'd been dating Marcus Donnelly for 2 years. He was my first serious relationship, the first man I'd introduced to my family, the first person I'd allowed myself to imagine a future with. We talked about engagement. We looked at apartments together. We were building something real. Then Brooke came home for Thanksgiving during her junior year of college. She was single at the time, fresh off a breakup with some guy who'd apparently wronged her, though the details changed every time she told the story. She met Marcus at our parents' house, and I watched something shift in her eyes. It was a look I'd seen before, the one she got when she saw something she wanted to take. The flirting started immediately. She laughed too loud at his jokes. She touched his arm constantly. She asked him endless questions about his work, his hobbies, his life, all while I sat there feeling like a ghost at my own family gathering. I told myself I was being paranoid. Marcus loved me. Brooke was just being friendly. I was reading too much into innocent interactions. But 3 weeks after that Thanksgiving, Marcus broke up with me. He was vague about his reasons, talking about needing space and figuring out what he wanted. He said it wasn't about anyone else. He was lying. 1 month after our breakup, Brooke posted a photo on social media. She was kissing Marcus. The caption read something sickeningly sweet about unexpected love finding you when you least expect it. My phone exploded with messages from friends asking what happened. I called my mother, crying, asking how Brooke could do this to me. Judith's response was delivered in that calm, rational tone she used when she wanted to make me feel crazy for having emotions. She said that Marcus clearly wasn't right for me if he could be swayed so easily. She said that Brooke and Marcus had a connection, and who was I to stand in the way of love? She said I should be happy for my sister. That conversation taught me that in my family, my pain would always matter less than Brooke's happiness. The relationship lasted 6 months. Brooke dumped Marcus the moment someone more interesting came along, leaving him heartbroken and full of regrets he tried to share with me through apologetic text messages I never answered. I learned 2 things from that experience. First, Brooke didn't actually want Marcus. She wanted to prove she could take him from me. Second, my parents would let her take anything from me without consequence. So, I did what any rational person would do when faced with that kind of toxic dynamic. I moved as far away as I could get. I packed up my life in Connecticut and relocated to Seattle, putting nearly 3,000 miles between myself and the family that had never really seen me. For 5 years, I kept contact minimal. Holiday phone calls, occasional text messages, enough to maintain the appearance of family without the reality of constant disappointment. I built a life in Seattle, a good life, surrounded by people who chose me because they valued me, not because they were obligated by blood. I thought distance had solved the problem. I was wrong. Distance just meant I didn't see the knife coming until it was already in my back. I met Patrick Sullivan 2 years ago at an architecture conference in Portland. He was presenting on sustainable structural engineering, and I was in the audience, genuinely interested in the intersection of design and environmental responsibility. After his presentation, we ended up at the same coffee stand, both ordering the same ridiculous caramel macchiato that neither of us would typically drink, but both needed after a day of technical presentations. We laughed about our matching bad decisions. We started talking. That conversation stretched into dinner. Dinner stretched into a walk along the waterfront. By the end of the evening, I knew I'd met someone different. Patrick was a structural engineer, practical and methodical in his work, but warm and genuine in everything else. He came from a big family in Oregon, the youngest of 4 siblings, and he talked about them with an easy affection that felt foreign to me. When I carefully mentioned that my family and I weren't particularly close, he didn't pry. He just said that family comes in all forms, and sometimes the one you build matters more than the one you're born into. That sentence made me fall a little bit in love with him right there on the Portland waterfront. Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately, like a building with a solid foundation. Patrick didn't rush me. He understood that I had walls, and instead of trying to knock them down, he waited patiently for me to open the doors on my own terms. We spent weekends hiking in the Cascades, cooking elaborate meals in his apartment, talking about everything from structural load calculations to our favorite childhood books. His family welcomed me with an openness that felt almost aggressive compared to what I was used to. His mother, Darlene, hugged me the first time we met and said she was so happy Patrick had found someone who made him smile like that. His siblings texted me directly, including me in group chats and inside jokes. His father, Hugh, asked thoughtful questions about my work and actually listened to the answers. Being around the Sullivan family felt like watching a documentary about a species I'd heard about but never seen in the wild. This was what functional family love looked like. 6 months ago, Patrick proposed during a hike up Mount Rainier. We'd reached a viewpoint with the mountains stretched out before us, covered in snow that caught the afternoon sun and turned everything gold. He didn't make a big production of it. He just took my hand, told me that every structure needs a strong foundation and I was his, and asked if I'd spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with him. I said yes before he even finished getting the ring out of his pocket. We sat on that mountain for an hour, just holding each other and watching the light change, and I felt happier than I could remember feeling in my entire adult life. But underneath that happiness was a thread of dread, because I knew I'd have to tell my family. I knew that somehow, some way, this joy would get complicated. I waited 2 weeks before calling my parents. I rehearsed what I'd say. I tried to prepare myself for their lukewarm response. It went exactly as expected. Judith answered the phone, and when I told her Patrick had proposed, there was a beat of silence before she said congratulations in the same tone she might use to acknowledge that I'd told her it was raining. She asked basic questions about Patrick, questions she should have known the answers to, because I'd mentioned him dozens of times over the past 2 years, but she clearly hadn't retained any of it. Then came the question I'd been dreading. Have you told Brooke? Everything always circled back to Brooke. I said I was planning to call her next. Judith said that was good, that Brooke would be so excited for me, that it would mean so much to her to be included. The call lasted maybe 10 minutes. Most of it was Judith telling me about Brooke's latest endeavor, some wellness blog she'd started that already had 12 followers and was definitely going to be huge. Calling Brooke required more mental preparation. We'd maintained cordial distance since the Marcus incident, talking maybe once every few months, keeping things surface level and safe. I video called her on a Saturday afternoon when I knew she'd be available. Her face appeared on my screen, perfectly made up even though she was supposedly just hanging out at home, and she squealed when I showed her the ring. She seemed genuinely happy. She asked a million questions about the proposal, about Patrick, about our plans. I found myself relaxing, thinking maybe enough time had passed. Maybe we'd both grown up. Maybe this could be a turning point in our relationship. I told her everything. I told her we'd set the date for September 15th because that's when we'd met at the conference in Portland, and it felt meaningful to get married on our anniversary. I told her about the venue I'd already booked, a historic mansion with gardens that overlooked the water. I told her about my vision for the wedding. Small and intimate, focused on the people who really mattered. Brooke said it all sounded perfect. She said she couldn't wait to be there. She said she was so happy I'd found someone who treated me well. She said all the right things. Looking back, that should have been my first warning sign. Brooke never said all the right things unless she was planning something. 3 months ago, Brooke called with news. She was dating someone. His name was Trevor Ashford, and he was a financial consultant she'd met through work. From the way she described him, he was perfect in that generic way people describe partners, when they're more in love with the idea of being in a relationship than the actual person. My parents were immediately obsessed. Judith called me specifically to tell me about Trevor, spending 30 minutes detailing his job, his education, his family background, all the markers of success that apparently made him worthy of attention. She didn't ask a single question about my wedding planning. The entire call was a Trevor appreciation session. I congratulated Brooke through text and went back to choosing between 2 florists, not thinking much about my sister's new relationship because why would I? We lived separate lives now. Her dating someone didn't affect me. 6 weeks ago, Brooke announced her engagement. She'd been dating Trevor for exactly 3 months. The engagement happened on some elaborate weekend getaway had apparently planned, complete with rose petals and a photographer hidden in the bushes to capture the moment. The photos were all over social media within an hour. My parents threw her an engagement party 2 weeks later, a massive event at their country club with over 100 guests. I was told about the party but not invited to help plan it. I flew back to Connecticut for the event because not going would have caused more drama than attending. Walking into that party felt like stepping into an alternate universe where I didn't exist. There were blown-up photos of Brooke and Trevor everywhere. My mother gave a tearful speech about her baby finding true love. Multiple relatives came up to me saying things like, "Can you believe Brooke's getting married?" And isn't this so exciting? Not one person mentioned that I was also engaged. Not one person asked about my own wedding planning. I was a guest at a celebration of my sister's love story, invisible in my own family once again. At some point during the party, I pulled Brooke aside to congratulate her privately. I asked when she and Trevor were thinking of getting married. She was vague, saying they hadn't set a date yet, that there were so many beautiful venues to consider, that they wanted to take their time planning something special. I mentioned that my wedding was September 15th, just in case she'd forgotten, and that I hoped she and Trevor would be there. She hugged me and said of course she'd be there, that she wouldn't miss it for the world. The hug lasted a beat too long. Her smile was a fraction too wide. Something felt off, but I couldn't pinpoint what. I flew back to Seattle the next day with a vague sense of unease I couldn't shake. Patrick asked if the party had been okay. I told him it was fine, just typical family stuff. I didn't tell him about the feeling in my gut that something bad was coming. I didn't want to sound paranoid. I didn't want to be the woman who couldn't let go of old hurts and always expected the worst. But my gut was right. It's always right when it comes to Brooke. Then, 3 days ago, I was at the bridal boutique for my final dress fitting. My phone buzzed with a notification, an email with a digital invitation attached. I opened it absently, assuming it was something work-related. Instead, I saw Brooke's and Trevor's names in elegant script, inviting me to celebrate their marriage on September 15th. My September 15th. My date. My carefully chosen, meaningful, already announced to everyone date. I called Brooke immediately, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and cheerful. I asked her if she'd sent me the right invitation, if maybe there was a typo on the date. She said, "Oh my God, what a crazy coincidence, that Trevor had really wanted that date, and the venue only had that one opening available." I reminded her that I'd told her my date months ago. She said she must have forgotten, that she'd been so busy with planning that the dates all blurred together. She said surely we could figure something out, that maybe I could shift my wedding by a week or two, since hers was already so far along in the planning process. Every word out of her mouth was a lie, and we both knew it. This wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. This was Brooke doing what she'd always done, taking what was mine and making it hers, but this time she'd gone too far. This time she wasn't just stealing a boyfriend I could eventually get over. She was trying to steal one of the most important days of my life. She was forcing me to choose between having my wedding on my chosen date and having my family there to witness it. She was banking on me being the one to back down, to be reasonable, to sacrifice what I wanted so she could have what she wanted. And as I stood there in that bridal boutique, staring at the invitation that felt like a declaration of war, I realized something. I was done backing down. I was done being reasonable. I was done sacrificing myself on the altar of keeping Brooke happy. Whatever happened next, whatever fallout came from this, I was keeping my date. And I was going to get married surrounded by people who actually loved me, even if that meant my family chose her over me one final time. I called my parents that same night, still sitting in my car outside the bridal boutique because I couldn't drive yet, couldn't move, could barely breathe through the anger coursing through my body. My father answered. I asked if he'd received Brooke's invitation. He said yes, that it was beautiful, that Brooke and Trevor seemed so happy. I asked if he noticed the date. There was a pause, the kind of pause that told me he absolutely had noticed and had been hoping I wouldn't bring it up. Marshall cleared his throat and said that yes, had noticed. And it was unfortunate timing. Unfortunate timing. Like it was weather. Like it was random chance. I told him it wasn't unfortunate timing, it was deliberate sabotage. He said I was being dramatic. My mother got on the phone, her voice already defensive, already preparing to make me the unreasonable one. I explained the situation as calmly as I could manage. I told them I'd announced my date 8 months ago. I told them Brooke knew. I told them this was intentional. I asked them to talk to Brooke, to ask her to pick a different date. Judith's response felt like a punch to the stomach. She said that Brooke had already put down deposits. She said that rescheduling would be difficult and expensive. She said that maybe I could move my wedding since mine was in Seattle anyway, and most of the family would have to travel regardless. She actually suggested that I change my plans to accommodate Brooke's scheme. I reminded them that I'd also put down deposits. I reminded them that I'd sent save the date cards to over 80 people. I reminded them that this was my wedding too, and I'd planned it first. Marshall interrupted me with the sentence that crystallized everything wrong with our family dynamic. He said, "Don't be selfish, Cassidy. Family is supposed to support each other." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. I was being selfish for wanting to keep the wedding date I'd chosen and announced months before Brooke even got engaged. But Brooke stealing that date, knowing it would hurt me, knowing it would force an impossible choice that wasn't selfish. That was just Brooke being Brooke, and everyone else was expected to accommodate it. I asked them point blank if they were planning to come to my wedding. Judith said they'd have to think about it. They'd have to see what they could work out. They ended the call saying they loved me and hoped I'd understand their difficult position. I sat in my car for 20 minutes after that call, crying so hard I fogged up the windows. The extended family got involved within 24 hours. My Aunt Dorothy called, her voice dripping with fake concern, saying she'd heard about the wedding conflict. I explained my side, hoping someone in the family would see reason. Dorothy said she understood why I was upset, but couldn't I be the bigger person? Brooke was younger, she said. Brooke was more sensitive. Brooke would be devastated if her wedding had to change. What about me being devastated? That question went unasked because the answer was obvious. My devastation had never mattered as much as Brooke's inconvenience. My cousin Helen sent a text message that made my blood boil. It said she couldn't believe I was making things so difficult for Brooke, that family was supposed to support each other during important life moments, that she hoped I'd reconsider my stubbornness. The entire family had been fed Brooke's version of events, the one where she was the victim of unfortunate timing and I was the difficult sister causing problems. Brooke's social media campaign started subtly. She posted a photo of herself looking pensive, with a caption about how wedding planning was more stressful than she'd expected, and how she was praying for family harmony during this special time. The comments flooded in from relatives and friends telling her to stay strong. She posted about how important family was to her, how she couldn't imagine getting married without the people she loved most. She never mentioned me by name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew what she was really saying. She was painting herself as the victim of some unnamed family drama, generating sympathy and support, while I looked like the villain for simply refusing to give up what was mine. My real friends, the ones in Seattle who knew the whole story, saw through it immediately. Reese Martinez, my maid of honor and best friend since college, commented on one of Brooke's posts with a simple, "The truth always comes out." Patrick's sister Ainsley commented, "Character reveals itself through actions." My former architecture professor Victoria Lang wrote, "Integrity doesn't need to announce itself." Brooke didn't respond to any of these comments, but she didn't need to. The battle lines were drawn. Patrick's response to all of this was exactly what I needed. He was furious on my behalf in a way my own family had never been. He wanted to keep our original date. He said we weren't changing anything for someone who deliberately tried to sabotage us. He suggested we should elope instead, just take off to a courthouse somewhere and get married without any of this family circus. Part of me wanted that. Part of me wanted to escape the whole mess. But another part of me, the part that had spent 32 years being invisible and overlooked, wanted to have my wedding. I wanted to wear my dress and say my vows and celebrate with people who loved me. I wanted what I'd planned and paid for and dreamed about. Patrick understood. He said we'd have our wedding exactly as planned, and anyone who chose not to come had made their priorities clear. Reese came over the night after my parents told me they were thinking about attending Brooke's wedding instead of mine. She brought wine and takeout, and we sat on my apartment floor while I cried and raged and said all the things I'd been holding in for years. Reese listened to everything, then said something I needed to hear. She said we were keeping the date. She said we'd let Brooke explain to everyone why half the family couldn't attend both weddings. She said anyone who chose Brooke's wedding over mine was showing me exactly who they were, and I should believe them. She reminded me that I had 80 people who'd already RSVP'd yes to my wedding. People who cared about me genuinely. and that was more family than most people ever got. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two very different things. The final blow came a week after Brooke's invitation arrived. Judith called again. Her voice had that careful, measured quality she used when delivering news she knew I wouldn't want to hear. She said that she and Marshall had decided to attend Brooke's wedding. She said Brooke needed them more because she was younger and this was more stressful for her. I asked what about my wedding. She said they couldn't be in two places at once. She said they hoped I'd understand. She said I was the strong one, the independent one, the one who'd built a whole life without them, so surely I could handle this. Marshall got on the line and added that they loved me, but family had to make difficult choices sometimes, and they'd chosen what they thought was best. They'd chosen Brooke. Again, they'd always choose Brooke. That call broke something in me that had been cracking for years. But it also freed something. I was done trying to win their love. I was done competing for scraps of attention. I was done twisting myself into shapes that might finally make them see me. They were never going to see me. And I was finally ready to accept that and move forward anyway. Anger, yes, but also curiosity. Brooke's story had too many convenient details that didn't quite add up. She claimed the venue only had September 15th available, but that seemed statistically unlikely for a venue booking just 3 months out. I decided to do some investigating. I found the venue's website through Brooke's social media posts where Shed tagged the location. It was a beautiful estate in Connecticut, exactly the kind of place Brooke would choose for maximum show. I called them during my lunch break, pretending to be a potential bride interested in booking for September. The coordinator who answered was friendly and helpful. She said September was a popular month, but they actually had several dates still available, including the 8th, the 22nd, and even the 29th. No mention of 15th being the only option. I asked specifically about September 15th, saying I'd heard it was an amazing date. She confirmed it was booked for a wedding, but said if I was flexible, they had other beautiful September dates. I thanked her and hung up. Brooke had lied about the venue restriction. This wasn't about availability. This was pure, calculated choice. Next, I needed to understand more about Trevor. Something about him bothered me. Brooke had dated plenty of guys over the years, but they all had a similar quality. They were showy, the kind of men who looked good in photos and could be paraded around as status symbols. Trevor seemed different from those photos, quieter maybe, less performative. I looked at his LinkedIn profile and noticed we had a mutual connection. Graham Foster had worked with Patrick on a commercial project last year. I'd met Graham a few times at industry events. I called him casually, saying I was trying to get a gift for a friend's engagement and wanted to ask someone who knew the groom what he might like. Graham knew Trevor from business school. He said Trevor was a nice guy, maybe a bit passive, but solid. Then he said something interesting. He mentioned being surprised by how quickly Trevor got engaged, because when they'd grabbed drinks a few months back, Trevor had mentioned feeling pressured by his girlfriend about moving faster than he was comfortable with. Graham hadn't realized the girlfriend was Brooke. When I told him, there was a pause. Graham said he hoped everything worked out but that Trevor had seemed stressed about the relationship timeline. That conversation planted a seed. Maybe Trevor wasn't the willing co-conspirator here. Maybe he was another one of Brooke's victims. The money trail came from an unexpected source. My cousin Willa, who'd always been kind to me despite the family dynamics, called me late one night. She said she probably shouldn't tell me what she was about to tell me, but she thought I deserved to know. Willa had been at my parents' house helping them with some paperwork, and Shed overheard a conversation between Judith and Marshall. They were discussing wedding budgets. Brooke was getting $50,000 for her wedding. I'd received $5,000 as an engagement gift. Willa had heard my mother say that Brooke deserved the best. That Shed been through so much. That this wedding needed to be perfect for her. Willa asked what exactly Brooke had been through. Shed had every advantage, every opportunity, every bit of support. Meanwhile, I'd struggled and worked and built everything on my own. The financial disparity was just one more piece of evidence that my parents had never seen us as equals. They'd never pretended to. I went down a social media rabbit hole one evening while Patrick was working late. Reese came over with her laptop, and we became amateur detectives, scrolling through months of Brooke's posts looking for patterns. What we found was illuminating. Brooke had started posting about wanting to get married almost immediately after Id announced my engagement. Before Patrick proposed to me, her social media was full of posts about being independent and not needing a man. After my announcement, suddenly she was posting quotes about finding your soulmate and how life was meaningless without partnership. Her first photo with Trevor appeared exactly 2 weeks after Id sent my save-the-date cards. The timeline was too perfect. Reese pointed out that Brooke had likely engineered the entire relationship with Trevor as a competition. She'd found someone quickly, pushed for a fast engagement, and deliberately chosen my date. Every step was calculated. But the most revealing conversation happened when I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to Marcus, the ex-boyfriend Brooke had stolen years ago. I found him on social media and sent a simple message. I said I needed to ask him something about Brooke and that I hoped he'd be willing to talk. He responded within an hour, saying he'd been wondering if someone would ever reach out, that he'd been carrying guilt for years. We met for coffee in Boston when I flew back for a work meeting. Marcus looked older, tired, like the years had been heavier than they should have been. He apologized before I even sat down. Then he told me everything. Brooke had pursued him aggressively after that Thanksgiving. She'd shown up at his office. She'd sent him messages late at night. She'd told him stories about how I didn't really love him, how I'd been planning to break up with him, how I'd been seeing someone else. None of it was true, but Marcus was young and confused, and Brooke was persistent. She seduced him deliberately. She made him feel special and wanted in ways he'd been craving. The moment they were officially together, she lost interest. She dumped him within months. Marcus said he realized too late that Shed never wanted him. Shed wanted to prove she could take him from me. He said Brooke wanted to prove she could take me apart. Those were his exact words. Hearing it confirmed what I'd always suspected, made something click into place. This wasn't about love or weddings or Trevor. This was about Brooke needing to win some twisted competition. I'd never agreed to enter. All the evidence pointed to one conclusion. Brooke had been waging psychological warfare against me for years, and my parents had enabled every attack. This wedding date theft was just the latest battle in a war I'd been losing because I didn't realize I was fighting. But now I knew. Now I had clarity. And clarity meant I could finally decide how to respond. I wasn't going to react emotionally anymore. I wasn't going to beg or plead or try to make anyone understand. I was going to make a choice based on what I wanted, what I deserved, what would make me happy. For the first time in my entire life, I was going to choose myself without apology or guilt. That decision, simple as it sounds, felt revolutionary. Patrick, Reese, and I gathered in our apartment on a rainy Seattle evening 3 weeks before the wedding date. I'd laid out everything I'd discovered like evidence in a court case. The venue lie, Trevor's reluctance, the money disparity, Marcus' confession, the social media timeline. Patrick looked at all of it, and then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. He asked the question that mattered most. What do you want to do? Not what did I think I should do, not what would cause the least drama, but what did I actually want? I realized no one had asked me that question in this entire mess. Everyone had opinions about what I should do to accommodate Brooke, to keep the peace, to be the bigger person. I wanted to get married on September 15th. I wanted to marry Patrick surrounded by people who loved us. I wanted Brooke to know that she didn't win this time. Reese leaned forward with that fierce look she got when she was ready to fight someone's battles with them, and said she was listening. We started brainstorming options, treating it like a strategic planning session. Option 1 was going public with everything. I could post the timeline on social media, show the evidence of Brooke's manipulation, expose the lies about the venue availability, share the financial disparity, let everyone see exactly what had been happening. The pro was obvious. It would clear my name and show the family who was really causing the drama. But the cons were equally obvious. It would make me look petty and vindictive. My family would circle the wagons around Brooke even harder. I'd become the villain in their story no matter what proof I provided, because people believe what they want to believe, and they wanted to believe Brooke was the victim. We rejected that option. It would feel good for about 5 minutes, and then make everything worse. Option 2 was a private confrontation. I could gather all my evidence, sit Brooke down, show her that I knew exactly what she'd done, and demand she change her date. Patrick pointed out that this assumed Brooke had shame or guilt, and nothing in her pattern of behavior suggested she possessed either quality. Reese added that Brooke would just twist the confrontation, play the victim harder, tell everyone it attacked her during this stressful time. She'd probably post about it vaguely on social media and generate even more sympathy. A confrontation would give Brooke exactly what she wanted, which was attention and drama and the ability to paint herself as wounded. We rejected that option too. Then Patrick said something that shifted everything. He said we should keep our wedding exactly as planned and make it so authentic and beautiful that the truth would be obvious to anyone paying attention. We should invite the people who actually loved us. We should create a wedding that reflected who we really were, not some competition with Brooke or attempt to prove anything to my family. We should let Brooke have her family drama wedding with my parents and the relatives who chose appearances over authenticity. We should focus on building our own family with people who chose us. He said living well was the best revenge. And he was right. The goal wasn't to hurt Brooke. The goal was to be happy, despite her attempts to prevent that happiness. That was the option we chose. I spent the next 2 days crafting an email to my parents. I wrote and rewrote it a dozen times, trying to find the balance between honesty and dignity. The final version was simple and factual. I told them I was keeping my wedding date. I told them I was hurt by their choice to prioritize Brooke's wants over my needs one more time. I told them they were welcome to attend my wedding if they changed their minds, but I understood if they didn't. I said I hoped someday they'd understand what their favoritism had cost both of their daughters. I ended by saying I loved them but that I needed to focus on building a life with people who saw my value. I didn't send it angry. I sent it sad but clear. Their response came the next day. It was brief. They said they were sorry I felt that way, that they hoped I'd reconsider, that family should come first. They didn't say they'd changed their minds about attending. They didn't acknowledge any of my points about favoritism. They just reiterated that I was making things difficult. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. With that decision made, I shifted my focus entirely to building the wedding I actually wanted. I reached out to people who mattered. My mentor from architecture school, Victoria Lang, who'd believed in me when I was a struggling student and had helped me get my first major project. College friends who'd stayed in touch over the years and had always shown up when I needed them. Colleagues from my firm who'd become genuine friends. Patrick's entire family, who'd welcomed me with open arms from day one. My guest list became a roster of people who'd chosen to be in my life, who celebrated my successes without resentment, who showed up consistently. We had 80 people confirmed. Not one of them was attending out of obligation. Every single person wanted to be there. I looked at our wedding budget and realized something liberating. I'd been trying to keep costs down, partly because I knew my parents weren't contributing significantly, and I didn't want to seem like I was showing off or being excessive. But why was I limiting myself based on their judgment? This was my wedding. I had savings. I had a successful business. Patrick and I could afford to make this day exactly what we wanted. We upgraded the photographer to someone whose work I'd admired for years. We hired a caterer known for creative, delicious food, instead of the cheaper option. We added personal touches everywhere. Table markers that were miniature versions of buildings I'd designed. A playlist that told the story of our relationship. Vows we were writing ourselves that reflected our actual values and promises. Every detail became intentional and meaningful rather than chosen to please others or avoid criticism. One evening, about 2 weeks before the wedding, Patrick found me looking at the updated plans with actual excitement on my face, instead of the stress that had been there for months. He said I looked different. I asked him what he meant. He said I looked free. That word hit me hard because it was exactly right. For the first time since Brooke's invitation had arrived, maybe for the first time in my entire life, I felt free from the need to prove myself or compete or earn love that should have been freely given. I was planning a wedding for Patrick and me, surrounded by people who genuinely cared, celebrating something real. Brooke could have her show. I was done letting their decisions dictate my happiness. Patrick pulled me close and said, "Tomorrow wed, start our real life together." I realized that real life had already started the moment I decided to stop living for people who would never truly see me. 6 weeks before the weddings, Brooke noticed my silence. I'd stopped responding to family group texts. I'd stopped checking her social media. I hadn't reacted to any of her posts about wedding planning or her vague references to family drama. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon. Her voice had that false brightness she used when she was fishing for information. She asked if I was mad at her. I kept my voice calm and even. I told her no. I wasn't mad, just busy with my own planning. She asked directly if I was still doing September 15th. I said yes, we were keeping our date. I wished her a beautiful wedding and hung up before she could respond. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. I know it threw her off because Brooke's power had always come from my reaction. When I got upset, she could play the victim. When I argued, she could paint me as aggressive. When I begged, she could feel superior. But calm disinterest? She didn't have a script for that. The first attack came through my vendors. My florist called me 3 days after that conversation with Brooke. She said someone had contacted her claiming to be me, saying there was a family emergency and the wedding was canceled. The florist had been suspicious because the person used a different email address and the story seemed off, so Shed called my original number to confirm. I thanked her for checking and assured her the wedding was absolutely still happening. Over the next week, I got similar calls from my caterer, my photographer, and the venue coordinator. Someone was systematically trying to cancel my wedding services. Patrick helped me trace the phone numbers on the calls that had been made to the vendors. They all came from the same number, Brooke's cell phone. She hadn't even been smart enough to hide her tracks. We documented everything with screenshots and saved voicemails, not because I planned to use them, but because having proof felt important. I contacted all my vendors directly, warned them about the situation, and set up password protection on all my accounts so no changes could be made without verification. Brooke's sabotage attempt had failed, but it showed how desperate she was getting. The social media campaign escalated. Brooke posted a long message about how some people would do anything for attention, even hurt their own family members. She followed it up with another post about praying for family healing before her special day. The subtext was clear. I was the problem. I was the one causing pain. I was the attention seeker. The comments poured in from relatives who didn't know the full story. Aunt Dorothy wrote that some people were just jealous of happiness. Cousin Helen added that Brooke should stay strong and not let negativity affect her joy. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I didn't engage at all. But my real friends did. Reese commented that the truth always comes out. Patrick's sister Ainsley wrote that character reveals itself through actions. Victoria posted that integrity doesn't need to announce itself. These comments stayed up, visible to anyone reading, offering a counter-narrative without me having to say a word. My private messages filled up with notes from people who saw through Brooke's performance. Friends from college, colleagues, even a few distant relatives who'd watched this dynamic for years. They offered support and encouragement. They told me to stay strong. They said they were proud of me for not engaging with the drama. That support meant more than Brooke's attacks could hurt. Then Brooke went after the guests. She sent a message to every mutual friend and distant relative on both our lists. The message was carefully worded to seem generous while being completely manipulative. She said Shed love for them to celebrate with her on her special day, that she knew some people had gotten confused about the wedding dates, that she wanted to make sure everyone knew they were invited to join her and Trevor. She was offering to pay for flights for certain key people, cousins and family friends who'd been planning to attend my wedding. She was essentially trying to buy my guests. Several people switched. Relatives who'd RSVP'd yes to me sent apologetic messages saying they'd decided to go to Brooke's wedding after all. Each message stung a little, but I reminded myself of what Reese had said. Anyone who could be swayed like that wasn't really coming for me anyway. They were coming out of obligation or curiosity, and I didn't need those people at my wedding. Patrick's entire family stood firm. Not one person from his side even considered switching. The final count was clear. Brooke would have about 40 people at her wedding, mostly family members who felt obligated to attend. It'd have 80 people who genuinely wanted to be there. Quality over quantity in every possible way. The dress incident was almost comical in its transparency. My boutique owner, Margot Sullivan, called me laughing. She said someone had phoned claiming to be me, asking detailed questions about my dress design. The caller wanted to know the designer, the style, the specific details of the beadwork and cut. Margot knew me personally. We'd spent hours together during fittings, talking about architecture and design and life. She knew my voice, my mannerisms, my story. The caller was clearly not me. Margot told the person that they had strict privacy policies and couldn't discuss client information. Then she called to warn me. She described the caller as female, younger sounding, with an edge of entitlement in her voice. Definitely Brooke. She'd been trying to find out what my dress looked like, probably so she could copy elements or make sure hers was more elaborate. Margot asked if I wanted her to refuse to do any work for my sister. I said no, that wasn't necessary. Brooke's desperation to compete with even my dress showed how completely she'd spiraled. She wasn't getting married because she loved Trevor. She was getting married to win some imaginary contest. Then something unexpected happened. Patrick got a message from Trevor through a mutual professional connection. Trevor asked if they could meet for drinks, man to man. Patrick agreed, curious about what Brooke's fiancé wanted to discuss. They met at a bar downtown. Patrick told me later that Trevor looked stressed, exhausted, like someone carrying a weight he couldn't put down. Trevor confessed that he felt trapped in the engagement. He said Brooke had moved everything incredibly fast, pushing for the engagement after only 3 months of dating. Had only recently learned about the wedding date conflict with my wedding. Brooke had told him I didn't care about September 15th, that I'd picked it randomly and wouldn't mind changing. Now he was realizing she'd lied about a lot of things. He saw how she manipulated situations, how she twisted stories, how everything was always about her image and never about their actual relationship. He admitted he didn't think he could go through with the wedding, but didn't know how to get out without everything exploding. Patrick told him he didn't owe anyone a wedding he didn't want. He said life was too short to marry someone out of obligation or fear of drama. Trevor didn't make any promises, but Patrick could see him considering the possibility of escape. Patrick didn't tell me about this conversation right away, because he wasn't sure if it was his place to share. But the fact that Trevor was having these doubts confirmed what I'd suspected. Brooke had manufactured this entire situation, and it was collapsing around her. The final escalation came when my parents made a surprise visit to Seattle. They showed up at my architecture firm without warning, asking the receptionist if they could see me. I was in the middle of a client meeting. My assistant interrupted to say my parents were in the lobby. I excused myself and met them in our conference room, conscious of maintaining professionalism in my workplace. Judith started immediately, saying we needed to talk about the family crisis I'd created. I corrected her calmly. I hadn't created anything. I'd chosen a wedding date, announced it, and declined to change it when Brooke deliberately chose the same date months later. Marshall said I was being selfish, that Brooke was devastated by my stubbornness. I asked them to define selfish, because from where I stood, Brooke was the one who'd stolen my date, lied about venue availability, tried to sabotage my vendors, and manipulated guests. I'd simply refused to be victimized. Judith said after everything they'd done for me, I owed them more consideration. I asked her to list what they'd done for me specifically. She couldn't. She started talking about raising me and providing for me, the bare minimum of parenting. I pointed out the financial disparity, the constant favoritism, the pattern of putting Brooke's wants above my needs. I said facts, not accusations. They sat there silently because the facts were undeniable. I told them I loved them both, but I was done competing for their attention. I asked them to leave my office. Marshall said they might not come to the wedding at all then. I said that was their choice, and I'd made peace with it. They left angry, and I went back to my meeting, feeling stronger than I'd felt in weeks. I'd finally said what needed saying, without yelling or crying or begging. I'd stated truth, and let them sit with it. 5 days before both weddings, everything came crashing down for Brooke in a way I never could have orchestrated myself. Trevor called off the engagement. I heard about it through Willa, who called me immediately after witnessing the aftermath at my parents' house. Trevor had told Brooke he couldn't marry someone he didn't fully trust, that Head found too much evidence of lies and manipulation, that he needed to be honest with himself about what he really wanted. Brooke's wedding was cancelled. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, the guests, everything was suddenly undone. My parents went into complete panic mode. Judith called me within an hour of Trevor's departure. Her voice was frantic, verging on hysterical. She said I needed to come home right now. I asked what happened. She said Brooke's wedding was cancelled. Trevor had left her, and Brooke was falling apart. She said I needed to be there for my sister. I stayed calm. I told her I was sorry that happened, but I was in Seattle preparing for my own wedding in 5 days. Judith's voice went sharp. She asked how I could be so cold when my sister needed me. I asked her where Brooke had been when I needed her. When she stole my boyfriend years ago. When she deliberately took my wedding date. When she tried to sabotage my vendors. Did Brooke need me then, or did she need to hurt me? Judith asked what I was talking about. I told her to ask Brooke about the vendor cancellation attempts. I told her to ask Brooke if the venue really only had September 15th available. I told her to ask Brooke why she'd chosen this date after knowing mine for 8 months. Then I hung up. Willa called me that evening with the full story. She'd been at my parents' house when Brooke had her complete meltdown. According to Willa, Brooke had broken down sobbing, and in the midst of her breakdown, she'd confessed everything. She admitted she took my wedding date deliberately. She said she wanted to teach me a lesson. She said I always thought I was better than her with my career and my independence and my life in Seattle. She said she wanted to prove she could have a more beautiful wedding, more guests, more attention. She admitted she'd tried to cancel my vendors. She revealed she'd lied about the venue only having 1 date available. My parents had finally heard the truth, directly from Brooke's mouth. Willa said Judith and Marshall sat in stunned silence as their golden child admitted to months of calculated cruelty. Willa told me that my mother kept saying she didn't know, she didn't realize, she hadn't understood the extent of it. But that was the problem, wasn't it? They'd never asked. They'd never questioned Brooke's version of events. They'd never considered that I might be telling the truth because considering that would mean admitting they'd failed me for 32 years. Brooke's rage texts started that night and continued for 2 days. The first one said this was my fault. If I'd just changed my date like a normal person, she'd still be getting married. The second said I'd ruined her life by being stubborn and selfish. The third said everyone would know what I'd done, that she'd make sure I was blamed for her broken engagement. They escalated from there, getting more unhinged and vitriolic. She said she hoped I was happy now that I'd destroyed her chance at happiness. She said I'd always been jealous of her. She said I was a terrible sister. Then, in the last message she sent before I blocked her number, she wrote the truest sentence she'd ever spoken to me. She said she hated me and always had. There it was. The truth finally spoken out loud after decades of fake sisterly affection. She hated me. She'd always hated me. And every cruel thing she'd done had come from that hatred. I screenshot all the messages, saved them in a folder I'd probably never look at again, and blocked her completely. I wrote that I hoped she found peace and that I'd found mine. Then I cut the cord completely. My parents called together 2 days later. They were calmer but still struggling. She couldn't say manipulative or cruel or calculating because saying those words would mean admitting what their daughter really was. Marshall said they may have been too easy on her over the years. It was the understatement of the century. They said they wanted to come to my wedding. Judith's voice was almost pleading. She asked if it was too late, if they could still attend. I told them I needed to think about it. Marshall said they were my parents, as if that fact alone entitled them to be there. I said that being my parents meant something. It meant showing up, seeing me, choosing me, sometimes instead of always choosing Brooke. I said if they wanted to be at my wedding, they needed to understand they'd be guests, not honored parents. They wouldn't sit in the front row. They wouldn't be recognized specially. They'd be there because I was gracious enough to allow it, not because they'd earned it. I gave them 24 hours to decide if they could accept those terms. I talked to Patrick and Reese about whether to let them come. Patrick said it was entirely my call and he'd support whatever I decided. Reese said they didn't deserve to be there after everything they'd done, but I realized something during that conversation. This wasn't about what they deserved, this was about who I wanted to be. I wanted to be someone who could be the bigger person without being a doormat. Someone who could set boundaries while still leaving room for potential growth. Someone who could say, my parents had failed me, but maybe, just maybe, they could learn to do better. I decided to invite them on my terms. They'd sit in the back. They wouldn't walk me down the aisle. They wouldn't give speeches. They'd be witnesses to my happiness, nothing more. They accepted the terms without argument, which told me they were finally starting to understand the magnitude of what they'd done. The extended family reckoned with the truth over those final days before the wedding. Willa shared what had happened with other relatives. Aunt Dorothy called to apologize. She said she should have listened to my side instead of assuming Brooke was the victim. Cousin Helen sent an elaborate flower arrangement with a note saying she'd been wrong to judge me. Several relatives who'd switched their RSVPs to attend Brooke's now cancelled wedding asked if they could come to mine instead. I said no. It wasn't out of spite, it was out of self-respect. The people who believed in me from the start would be there. The people who'd needed proof before they'd take my side had shown me who they were, and I believed them. My guest list stayed at 80 people who'd never wavered. The night before my wedding, I couldn't sleep. I went out to our apartment balcony and looked at the Seattle skyline. All those buildings lit up against the dark sky, all those structures someone had designed and built from nothing. Patrick found me there and wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. I told him I didn't feel happy that Brooke was miserable. He said that was because I was a good person, that spite wasn't in my nature. I said I just felt free, like I'd finally cut a rope it'd been dragging behind me for decades. Patrick said tomorrow we'd start our real life, our life with people who chose us. We stayed up watching the sunrise together, and I felt more at peace than I had in months. Everything that had happened had led to this moment. I was marrying someone who saw me completely. I was surrounded by people who valued me genuinely. I'd stopped fighting for scraps from people who'd never feed me properly. And I'd done it all with my dignity intact. Whatever happened at the wedding, I'd already won the only victory that mattered. I'd chosen myself. I woke up on September 15th in a hotel suite with Reese and Patrick's sister Ainsley, sunlight streaming through the windows overlooking Elliott Bay. The first thought I had was that this was my wedding day, and the second thought was that I felt purely, completely happy. No anxiety about family drama, no worry about competing with Brooke. Just excitement to marry Patrick and celebrate with people who loved us. Reese was already awake, ordering coffee and pastries for everyone. Ainsley was on the phone, confirming last-minute details with the venue. The hair and makeup artists arrived right on time. Friends of friends who'd become part of our extended circle. The atmosphere in that suite was everything I'd hoped for. Laughter and champagne and genuine happiness. Nobody was stressed. Nobody was fighting. Nobody was creating drama. We were just three women helping someone get ready for the best day of her life. Margot Sullivan arrived personally to deliver my dress. Shed wrapped it carefully, and when we unwrapped it together, I felt tears start. The dress was perfect. It incorporated architectural details into the beading, geometric patterns that reflected my profession and my aesthetic. It was elegant but not fussy, beautiful but not costume-like. It was me in dress form. When I put it on, Reese started crying. She said I looked like myself but elevated, and that was exactly what a wedding dress should do. It shouldn't transform you into someone else. It should just make you more gloriously yourself. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who'd fought her way to this moment, who'd refused to compromise her happiness, who'd built something real and true. I felt beautiful and authentic and ready. There was a knock on the suite door. Ainsley answered it and came back saying my mother was in the hallway asking to speak with me alone. My heart started racing. Reese immediately went protective, asking if I wanted her there. I told her it was okay, that I could handle this. I stepped into the hallway where Judith was waiting. She was already dressed for the wedding, looking older than I remembered, with tears streaming down her face. She said I looked so beautiful. I thanked her. Then she said something I'd waited 32 years to hear. She said she'd been a terrible mother to me. Not in the past tense, not with qualifications, just the simple truth. She said she didn't know why she'd always favored Brooke. Maybe because Brooke seemed to need her more, seemed more fragile, demanded more attention. But she realized now that I'd needed her too. I'd just needed her differently. And she'd failed to see it. I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't the full healing I might have wanted. It didn't erase decades of pain. But it was real acknowledgement, and that mattered. I told her I'd needed her my whole life, that I'd spent years trying to earn the love she gave Brooke freely, that I'd finally stopped trying because it was destroying me. Judith said she saw that now. She said watching me with Patrick's family last night at the rehearsal dinner, seeing how his mother hugged me and his father beamed at me and his siblings included me so naturally, she'd realized what had been missing. She'd seen what real parental love looked like, and she'd been confronted with her own failure. She asked if we could work on our relationship after today. I told her maybe. That I was open to it. But it would have to be different. It would have to be real. She said she understood. We hugged in that hotel hallway, and it wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The ceremony took place in the garden of a historic mansion, overlooking Puget Sound. September in Seattle is magic when the weather cooperates, and today it cooperated beautifully. Warm sun, light breeze, flowers in full bloom. Our 80 guests were seated in chairs arranged in a semicircle. Wed deliberately skipped the traditional wedding party lineup. Reese stood beside me as maid of honor. Patrick's brother Jasper stood beside him as best man. But everyone else sat together because this wasn't about hierarchy or obligation. It was about community. Every detail was personal. Table markers were miniature versions of buildings I'd designed. Quotes about building and creating were printed on the programs. Photos from our relationship journey lined the walkway. Everything told our story. When the music started, I walked down the aisle alone. The choice was deliberate and meaningful. I was giving myself away. To myself and to Patrick. I wasn't being transferred from my father's ownership to my husband's. I was choosing partnership as a whole, autonomous person. I saw Patrick waiting at the end of the aisle, and he was crying. I saw his parents beaming. I saw Reese dabbing her eyes. I saw my mentor Victoria nodding with pride. I saw my colleagues cheering quietly. I saw my parents in the back row, both crying. I saw everyone who'd shown up for me, and I felt completely held by love. When I reached Patrick, he whispered that I was radiant, and I whispered back that I was happy. That was all that mattered. Patrick's vows came first. He said I'd taught him that family isn't just who you're born to, but who stands beside you when things are hard. He said I was the strongest person he knew, that my strength wasn't about being tough, but about being true to myself even when it cost me. He promised to always see me, choose me, and celebrate me. He promised to build a life with me based on honesty and partnership. His voice broke twice, and I handed him a tissue, and everyone laughed through their tears. Then it was my turn. I said Patrick had given me something. He'd been searching for my whole life. Not validation or approval, but true partnership. I said he'd shown me what it meant to be loved without having to earn it constantly. I promised to build our life together with integrity and joy. I promised to be his partner in every sense of the word. I promised to create something beautiful with him, the same way we'd create beautiful buildings together. By the time we finished our vows, there wasn't a dry eye in the garden. The reception unfolded under string lights as the sun set over the water. Dinner was creative and delicious, nothing stuffy or traditional unless we wanted it that way. The toasts made me cry all over again. Reese talked about meeting me in college, watching me work twice as hard as everyone else, seeing me finally find someone who appreciated her fully. She was funny and heartfelt and perfect. Jasper welcomed me to the Sullivan family with warmth that felt genuine. Victoria spoke about my integrity and creativity as an architect and as a person. Then Patrick's mother Darlene stood up. She said they hadn't just gained a daughter-in-law, they'd gained a daughter, and they were honored to have me in their family. She said she'd seen my strength and grace over the past year, and she was in awe of me. I cried happy tears, the kind that come from being truly seen and valued. The dancing was joyful and imperfect. Patrick and I swayed through our first dance, laughing when he stepped on my dress. When it came time for the father-daughter dance, Id made a choice that felt right. I danced with Patrick's father, Hugh, instead of Marshall. Hugh had treated me like a daughter from the moment we met. Head asked about my work and my dreams. Head offered advice when I asked for it and support always. Head shown up. That dance was my way of honoring real family over biological family. I saw my father watching from the back, and I saw understanding finally dawn on his face. He was seeing what Head missed, what Head chosen to miss for 32 years. Maybe that realization would change him. Maybe it wouldn't. Either way, I'd built my own family, and they were here celebrating with me. The night ended with a sparkler send-off. Patrick and I ran through a tunnel of light created by our guests, everyone cheering and celebrating. I turned back before getting into the car and looked at all those faces beaming at us. This was what I'd built when I stopped fighting for scraps. This was what happened when I chose myself and let people who valued me step forward. Patrick asked if I was ready to start our forever, and I said I'd been ready my whole life. We drove off into our new life, married and happy and free. Behind us was family drama and pain and years of feeling invisible. Ahead of us was a life we'd build together with people who chose us. I'd kept my wedding date. I'd married my person. I'd done it my way. And it was perfect. 1 month after the wedding, Patrick and I returned from our honeymoon in New Zealand to find our Seattle apartment exactly as we'd left it, except now we returned to it as husband and wife. Everything felt different, even though nothing physical had changed. We were settling into married life with surprising ease. My firm had landed a major commercial project while I was away, designing a sustainable office building downtown. Patrick was consulting on the structural elements. We were building things together professionally and personally, and life felt genuinely good in a way I hadn't expected it could feel after everything that had happened. I heard about Brooke through Willa, who kept me updated without me having to ask. Brooke had moved to Denver immediately after the wedding cancellation. She'd started therapy at my parents' insistence. She wasn't in contact with me, and I wasn't pursuing contact with her. My parents kept hoping for an eventual reconciliation between us. When Judith brought it up during one of our now weekly phone calls, I told her the truth. I wasn't opposed to having a relationship with Brooke someday, but it would have to be real. It would have to involve Brooke acknowledging what she'd done and doing the actual work to change. I wouldn't accept surface-level apologies or pretend everything was fine. If Brooke wanted a genuine sister relationship, I was open to that possibility. But I wouldn't sacrifice my peace for the appearance of family harmony ever again. My relationship with my parents was slowly, awkwardly improving. Judith called every week now. The conversations were stilted at first, both of us unsure how to talk to each other after years of disconnect. But she was trying. She asked about my work, about Patrick's family, about our life together. She listened to my answers instead of waiting for her turn to talk about Brooke. Marshall sent me a letter 2 weeks after the wedding. It was 3 pages long, handwritten, and it was the first time my father had really communicated with me in years. He apologized specifically for failing to see my worth. He acknowledged specific instances of favoritism. He didn't make excuses or try to justify his behavior. He asked for a chance to be a better father, acknowledging that he might not deserve one. I wrote back saying forgiveness was a process, not an event, but I was willing to work toward it if he was serious about changing. We were taking baby steps, but they were steps forward. I had coffee with Marcus when I was in Boston for work. Head reached out asking if we could talk, saying He'd seen my wedding photos online and wanted to say something in person. We met at a cafe near my hotel. Marcus looked settled, more mature than the young man I'd dated years ago. He told me I'd looked happy in the photos. I told him I was happy. He apologized again for his part in my family's dysfunction, for letting Brooke manipulate him, for hurting me. I told him we'd all been young, that we'd all been victims of Brooke's games in different ways. We talked for an hour about our lives now, where we'd ended up, what we'd learned. When we parted, I felt true closure for the first time. The wound that relationship had left had finally healed completely. Id started therapy right after the wedding. Working through decades of family trauma wasn't something I could do alone, and I wanted to make sure I didn't carry those patterns into my marriage. My therapist said something during our third session that shifted my perspective on everything. She said I'd broken a generational cycle. I asked what she meant. She explained that I'd refused to accept crumbs of affection, that I'd demanded what I deserved, that I'd been willing to lose relationships rather than participate in my own diminishment. She said that took extraordinary courage, that most people spend their whole lives trying to earn love from people whole never freely give it. She said by stopping that pattern, I'd freed myself and potentially changed what my future children would experience. That thought made me cry. I'd broken the cycle. Whatever family I built with Patrick would be different because I'd done the hard work of choosing myself. During a girls' night with Reese and Ainsley a few weeks after we got back from our honeymoon, Reese said I seemed different. I asked how. She said I seemed lighter, like I wasn't carrying something heavy anymore. Ainsley agreed, saying the tension that used to live in my shoulders was gone. I realized they were right. I'd been carrying the weight of my family's dysfunction for 32 years, trying to fix something that wasn't mine to fix, trying to earn something that should have been freely given. I'd finally put it down. I told them that was exactly what had changed. I'd stopped waiting for my family to see my worth. I'd started seeing it myself. And once I did that, everything else fell into place. The people who valued me stepped forward. The people who didn't faded into the background. I'd built a life around the ones who showed up. One evening, about 6 weeks after the wedding, I was at my drafting table working on designs for the new building project. Patrick brought me coffee, made exactly the way I liked it, and kissed the top of my head. We talked about the future. Maybe kids in a few years once the business was more established. Definitely a dog soon, because we'd been talking about getting one for months. Possibly buying a house with space for a proper home office. Normal, beautiful, mundane future planning. I thought about my journey from the girl desperate for approval to the woman who created her own validation. I realized that the best revenge wasn't hurting Brooke or making my parents regret their choices. The best revenge was building a beautiful life and being happy in it. Sitting at my drafting table, I had a moment of clarity about everything that had happened. For 32 years, I'd believed my family's narrative that Brooke was special and I was just there. When Brooke tried to steal my wedding day, Shed accidentally given me an unexpected gift. Shed forced me to make a choice. I could keep fighting for scraps from people who would never fill my plate, or I could walk away from that table entirely and find people who wanted to feast with me. I'd chosen myself. I'd chosen Patrick. I'd chosen people who chose me back. I'd learned that family isn't just blood. Family is who shows up consistently, who celebrates your successes without resentment, who sees your value without you having to constantly prove it. I would always love my parents and my sister in some complicated way, but I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd built my own family. I'd created my own worth, and that was something nobody could ever take from me. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. A package had arrived from Connecticut. I opened it to find a photo album I'd never seen before. Inside were pictures from my childhood that my parents had apparently stored away and never shown me. Photos of me building elaborate structures with blocks, me drawing buildings at age 5, me winning a science fair in middle school, me graduating high school with honors. All these moments of my life that had been documented but not celebrated. There was a note from Judith tucked inside. It said she'd been going through old boxes and found these photos. She wrote that I'd always been remarkable, that I'd always been special, and she was sorry she hadn't told me enough. She was sorry she hadn't seen what was right in front of her. I cried reading that note. Not from pain this time. From hope. From the possibility that people could change, that relationships could heal, that it was never too late to start doing better. I showed the album to Patrick. He flipped through the pages, looking at photos of a little girl who became the woman he loved. He said one word. Progress. I agreed. Not everything was healed. Not everything was perfect. But everything was moving forward. My parents were trying. Brooke was getting help. I was happy and building a life I loved. That was more than I'd ever expected to have. We put the album on our bookshelf, a symbol of the past acknowledged and the future still being written. I thought about everything I'd learned through this journey, about choosing yourself, not being selfish, but necessary, about how the people who truly love you will show up without you having to beg, about how sometimes the best decision is the hardest one, about how freedom comes from releasing the need for approval from people who'll never fully give it. I kept my wedding date. I married my person. I built my life on my own terms. And I learned that sometimes the best decision you can make is the one where you finally choose yourself, not out of spite or revenge, not to hurt anyone else, but out of love for the person you're becoming and respect for the life you deserve to live. That's what I decided when my sister tried to steal my wedding day. I decided I mattered. I decided my happiness was worth protecting. I decided I deserved to be chosen, and if my family wouldn't choose me, I'd choose myself. That decision changed everything. It gave me my wedding day, my marriage, my peace, and my freedom, and I would make that same choice every single time, because choosing yourself is never the wrong decision. It's the only decision that matters. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had to choose yourself over what your family wanted? Have you ever had to set boundaries that felt impossible but necessary? Drop your thoughts in the comments because I'd love to hear your stories. If this resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about family, boundaries, and choosing yourself. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to put themselves first. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you know you're not alone in your struggles and that choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's survival. Wishing you all the courage to build the life you deserve, surrounded by people who truly see you. Until next time, take care of yourselves.